to stop these wars, we have to calm this theological projection that your God is Satan, our God is the good one, you know. Anyway, to cut a long story short, so I wrote a whole book called A Call for Comparative Diabology a few years back. I gave a lecture in Oxford at the university there on the need for clearing all this mess up by having an academic overview of all the devil stuff going on. Why do some people talk about Lucifer? Why do they talk about Satan? What about Angra Mainyu, the Zoroastrian term? And I went into it all, and I even looked at things like Scientology, which has its own version of Satan's story. And they seem to claim he's in a cave in the Pyrenees Mountains, in chains, imprisoned there for being a naughty, bad UFO-type astronaut who was causing trouble 50 million years ago. And that's why these Scientologists, you know, that's what they teach you if you do their courses. At the highest level, that's what you're told. People like Tom Cruise. So I suspend judgment. I don't know. I think... Oh, and then there's one sad thing I will report. There was a conference a few years... Well, last year? At the University of Harvard. They have a really good divinity school. And I went to... attended online this course on new religions. And they had a talk about Satanism by an Italian priest and sociologist of religion. And he talked about a legal case that had happened in North Italy a few years back, when this little group of so-called Satanists in, I don't know, Milan somewhere up in the north, were doing silly kind of do-it-yourself satanic things. They were taking lots of drugs, and they were breaking all the rules. They were staying out all night, getting drunk, doing drugs, making sex, you know, in all kinds of ways. And then the leader of this group said, now we've got to commit a murder. I don't know if you've heard of this case.
I did, yeah, it's a few years ago.
Yeah, a few years ago. And the guy's still in prison. He's written a book about his life. He's stopped being a Satanist now. He's realised it's a bit silly. They killed one of their own group, I think, in a kind of ritual way. And this priest gave a talk, sort of academic talk about this, you know, the silliness of it. And I mean, I don't agree with any of that kind of violent ritual torture, killing. That's, you know, but romantic poets writing hymns to Satan, I can cope with that. And the intellectual courage of wanting truth, you know, I can cope with that. I share that view. Okay, that's that one. Any questions about that?
Oh, yeah, actually. There is a surah in the Quran that is called the Diabolic Surah. But I'm not sure if there is any connection, because I think it's just the prophet that is being in a phase of uncertainty and is saying.
Are you talking about satanic verses?
Yes, the satanic verses.
Yeah, I don't think the surah is called that. That's just a little bunch of verses in this surah, the satanic verses, which Rushdie wrote about.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. So that's right. That's quite famous. That. I mean, I've commented on this in detail in the commentary on the Quran, and it's quite, you know, it's interesting actually, because the ancient classical culture of Arabia worshipped pagan pantheon of gods and goddesses, like most ancient Romans and Greeks and Celts and so on. They had a pantheon like the Hindus. And at one point in the Quran, God, through Muhammad, says, that's fine, you know, go on worshipping your gods and goddesses, and name some. But as long as they're faithful Muslim, you know, and surrender to the one, that's fine. So it seems to be a kind of attempt to make peace with the pagans of Mecca, who were holding out for the right to worship their many gods. And it might, you know, had it stuck, we could have had a peace agreement there. But then a few days later, Muhammad got another revelation saying, no, that wasn't a real surah, that was from the devil, expunged that from the text, and it was taken out. And so you don't hear about this in the normal Quran. But it's interesting that in the unconscious of Muhammad, or however you explain how these verses came, which is what I go into in the commentary in detail. There's a bubbling away trying to find a reconciliation between pagan polytheism and monotheism, I think. And that's a very important conversation to have on the planet still. That's not been resolved. Still. What light can philosophy shed on it? You know. Well, that's why I did the table. If what I argue is that to be literate in religious and philosophical studies, you have to master and memorize and know all 163 boxes, at least to some extent, and including Satanism. And I'm not putting them forward either. I'm saying this is a good one or it's a bad one. It's an objective snapshot of the human psyche and our views, if you want. Okay, that's that. We'll stop there. That's jolly exciting. I can't resist this. The other thing I want to say is that in my 20s I did a huge work trying to reconcile Greek polytheism with Hebrew monotheism. I thought we need to solve that one, right? So I made a big chart of all the Greek gods and their descendants, and all the Hebrew heroes and the prophets and the sages and saints and angels and so on. And I was trying to marry them up, and I was looking at comparative mythology between the ancient Greeks and the ancient Hebrews. And there is an overlap. If you look at Phoenician sources, most Phoenician mythology has been lost because the Romans destroyed the libraries at Carthage, which I think was a crime. They should have shipped the books to Rome and then burnt the city. But unfortunately, the Phoenician, we know a bit about it from a historian who survived in Phoenicia itself, not in Carthage. And they had a sort of polytheistic pantheon. Anyway, cut a long story short, I think that the role that Prometheus plays in Greek mythology, he opposes God, i.e. Zeus. He's on the side of humanity. He steals knowledge from heaven. He gives it to mankind. He's on the side of mankind. I think he goes back to the same source as the Satan rebelling against God myth. I've traced this back to the Bronze Age times, when early ancestors of the Hebrews and the Phoenicians and the Semitic peoples of those parts, they had a similar myth that God had a rebellious angel who then opposes God and causes trouble. Yeah.
So we can oppose or we can compare the two things with Olympian gods and Titans.
That's another version of that same kind of myth. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's when, and it's an intergenerational struggle for power. So when the young generation come along and they oppose the old people on the throne, they're always called evil. That's the Satan coming, you know. And if you look at history, so when Luther started preaching, the Pope said it's the Antichrist, you know. And Luther said to the Pope, no, you're the Antichrist. And so they're all starting to call each other Satanists. Whereas I'm saying, let's be a bit more scientific about this. Let's look at what's actually going on. And if we enthrone love at the core of our intergenerational transactions, it's all a wheel of karma. Like, why fuss? Life and death, it's the wheel, you know. And so, anyway, it's really interesting delving into Bronze Age Mediterranean mythology for parallels between the satanic story and the Greek stories. I think they go back to a common root. And I think Robert Graves, who wrote the Greek myths, knew this as well. So, yes, it's a fertile area for research. That's why I think we should have this comparative diabology science. But if anyone wants to give me a chair at a university, I'll research it in detail. No problem.
Well, Bill Gates, Trump, Elon Musk.
Okay, your one was you wanted to know about UFOs and cosmology, with the emphasis on the latter. Yeah, this is interesting actually, because I stumbled across this because I'm an expert in Russian philosophy and Russian science, and I went to Moscow and I've met Russian philosophers, and when I was a student at the University of London, I specialised in Russian history of ideas and philosophy. And one of the streams of Soviet and Russian thought, going back to even earlier than the Soviets, was an exploration of the cosmos. They wanted to study the stars. They wanted to go to the stars. And cosmism was this idea that the Russians had, that we are just one little planet and our destiny is up there with the stars. And this is what sponsored their rocket program and why they called them cosmonauts, and they had a brilliant space exploration. They had thinkers, and the most important are a guy called Chizhevsky, Kolodny, and Vernadsky as well. These were great Russian scientists who were interested in exploring space. Vernadsky studied how life emerges on different planets. Take this planet, for instance, and it seems to come about through the interaction of geological processes over eons of time, which release gases, which then enable plants to form, and so on. So they were looking at life through a cosmic process. There was a chap called Oparin who had a theory about the origin of life. Again, it happens naturally, biologically, through cosmic processes on planets. So we're children of these cosmic processes. They had to be materialists because they're working in the dialectical materialism era. So they couldn't go on about spiritual stuff. But they came as close to it as possible. They talked about dialectical processes in nature, which is really a way of talking about spiritual stuff with a Hegelian tinge. And so cosmism is a thing in Russian history, and there's still people out there, and it's interesting. And then in the West, of course, we had the space race between Russia and America to get to the moon first, to get the first rockets into space. They saw this as a homecoming. Some of the people involved in these programs felt our home is really outer space. We're not just from this planet. And some of the Americans were like real mystics. And I've said this before, but Jack Parsons, who created the fuel that the Apollo program takes off and goes to the moon with, these gases that burn enough energy to get you out of the atmosphere of the Earth. He was a follower of Aleister Crowley, the Thelemite, and a magician who was applying his knowledge to the chemistry of rocket fuels, and that underlies the whole of NASA's program. So it's interesting. Cosmism is this idea that we have a stellar destiny, and they would say that God or the gods. This is where people like Eric von Daniken appear. That they say that the gods have visited the planet. These were advanced races of alien beings who've come here at different times throughout history and the last millions of years. And then the people they leave behind worship them as gods, but actually they were just visiting people from advanced civilizations. And to us, they would appear as gods. I suspend judgment on this, but there is an awful lot of people out there saying this is what happened. There's a guy in France here called Rael, who claims to have met some of these. He encountered a spacecraft in Auvergne in the 1970s, and they came out and told him he had a mission. And he founded a whole new religious movement, the Raelian movement. He's still alive in Canada. And there's lots of people that claim to have met these advanced beings. I suspend judgment, as I say, but it's interesting to study it. Ron Hubbard, who founded Scientology, another new religious movement, box number 98, he was also a disciple of Crowley and a friend of Jack Parsons. Nobody really knows this. He started out as a Crowleyite, and in California. He stole Jack Parsons' yacht, which really annoyed him, worth a lot of money. And they had a sort of magical battle, and Hubbard went a bit crazy and founded Scientology, promoting himself, me, whereas Parsons went off and invented rocket fuel. the point here is that these visionaries wanted to explore the bigger cosmic perspective. And in Scientology, as I say, Hubbard, who wrote science fiction, invented a really complicated mythology, like a kind of Gnostic mythology about the fall of man. Basically, this planet was ruled by sweet little early hominid types, like hobbits, no trouble to anyone. Then some really nasty aliens appeared, really, who'd been fleeing from a battle they'd lost in another part of the cosmos. They saw that this planet was undefended apart from these little hobbit type things, so they took it over. They enslaved the hobbits to worship them as gods, and it made life difficult, you know. But then the cosmic space police, who keep tabs on people, came to rescue the hobbits, because you're not allowed to go and colonize and enslave other little races. You have to observe the Star Trek non-interference rule. So they came and then they captured the nasty aliens. And that's the Satan guy who's in the Pyrenees. They're very, very violent. But the cosmic police came and captured him and stuck him in prison for 100 million years. And the Scientologists believe they are the descendants of the space police. They're the good guys, fighting this long, long, drawn-out cosmic battle against the bad guys. And most of us are the little hobbit-type people stuck in the middle. We're just like, we don't know what's going on, you know. So that's the Scientological cosmology that Tom Cruise believes in. I suspend judgment, you know. I don't know how it's going to end. I just want it to have a happy ending. As a philosopher, I want peace. And if that means, yeah, I've met other people too that talk about these cosmic battles between different alien type races in different parts of the universe, and they're all fighting for control of planet Earth, the good ones and the bad ones. You know, I once met a woman in London, when I was living in London, who had a houseboat on the Thames, who was a channeler person, you know, channeling. She used to channel alien stuff from the other star systems, and would get long messages and things. And she in another life, she was advising the cabinet of the government of the day. This was in the 1990s in Downing Street, about how to organise government policy. So I think that's interesting. I think there are people in high places that believe in all this stuff. I don't know if Elon Musk does, or probably. Be interesting to have private conversation with those guys. What I think we need as a planet is a sort of a common agreement, like everyone should sign, that we won't attack each other's countries, we will not destroy the planet, we will not release massive weapons of nuclear destruction and others that probably have been invented we don't know about. We will protect and preserve the environment. We will respect human lives. We won't enslave or persecute them. And we will preserve nature, you know. I'd like that to be like a common set of agreements that everyone signs up to, every nation and every intellectual and every political leader. And I've always said that, I suspend judgment on this, but if there are aliens roaming about trying to make trouble on planet Earth, well, I think we need to talk to them and ask them politely to leave. Because this planet, you know, shouldn't be a battleground for nasty, like, escaped criminals from other planets. You know, they shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. So anyway, I think...
I'm surprised as a philosopher.
Yeah.
I thought you were open to share peace with other planets.
Oh yes, I am. But not if they've got super enormous weapons could destroy the planet and start bullying us.
No, but they have to sign an agreement for peace, as well as
Well,
you
if they
propose.
will, yeah.
You propose it for all people on the planet. So I
can't
guess
the
there
aliens
is an
sign it?
extension for all the people in the universe.
No, absolutely, I'd be happy to I wasn't... What I was meaning is if they refuse to sign and refuse to become part of the
I
peace
just
team,
go home.
then they should just go off. They can do their wars somewhere else. Like, they can have a special planet where they can play gladiator games, you know. But no, and I've always said that I'd love to chair the first ever interplanetary philosophy seminar.
That would be great. I will attend.
Well, you know, if you see any aliens wandering about like hers, send them
I
over.
pray for that.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Anyway, thank you for that. Okay, any other questions about those two?
Thank you very much.
Okay, interesting. Right. Okay, I think it's time for the gods. Let's call the gods in. Because the final thing we do here in the Philosophy Club is we use the Tarot of the Gods, which is a set I've designed. It's a tarot pack which came from northern Italy into France in the Renaissance period as the quintessence of all the ancient wisdom in picture language. If you read books on the history of the tarot, they're very interesting.
There are no cards for Lucifer or Satan?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Oh, there is?
Oh, bien sûr.
Ah,
He
maybe.
gets his card. Well, I mean, the devil is one of the main tarot cards. So, yes, he has a card.
We didn't pick.
He's not appeared often. I mean, it'd be funny if he turns up this week. Yeah. So, but they're all male deities. There's most tarots have a mixture of male and female, but there are a lot of tarots that just have goddesses, women. Everyone's into the goddess these days, and I thought it's good to. I love the goddess. I'm a goddess worshipper, but I think we should balance it by having a tarot deck of men, male gods. So we've got all the male gods here. Not all, because there aren't enough cards, but quite a few from history. And still alive. Okay, so look, have a shuffle and then choose one, right? To bring to the meeting here.
Right?
Yeah,
Should I turn it?
yeah, turn it over, yeah. Okay. And then pass the cards over to our man. Thanks.
Thoughts?
Oh, Thoth. Okay, jolly good. Right. And you've got Manannan MacLear, haven't you?
Yes.
Which is the what?
Water.
A water card. Okay. So these are the two volumes that come with this Tarot of the Gods. It took me over a year to write these. And I think, you know, these are the largest books on the tarot that have been produced for a long time, if ever. But they're really interesting, and it's a mixture of kind of academic stuff plus intuitive stuff. So it's to use the cards. And he is the Nine of Water. So I designated these gods either earth suit, air suit, water, or fire suit. This one is water. Because Manannan is the sea god of the ancient Druids, and he was worshipped in the entire Celtic world. When I lived in a castle opposite the loch, Sea Loch in Argyll, I felt very strongly the presence of Manannan MacLear, being a druid on a castle, on a loch, with storms coming in from the Atlantic, rain. It was like sometimes you couldn't tell the difference between the loch and the air. It was so sodden. But I studied him in detail and learned to respect the traditions. The Isle of Man is named after him. He was, of course, called Neptune by the Romans. It's the same god. But Neptune has his own card. He's important enough, as does Poseidon. Manannan MacLear means the son of the sea, and he was the king of the other world. Now, what's interesting in the Celtic world, the heaven or other world is associated with the sea. And when the soul dies, it goes west across the sea to a magical islands, which is where Manannan MacLear lives. And it's a paradise island. And he was, but he also lives on the Isle of Man, which is an island in the middle of the British Isles, full of ancient legends. So, and also here in Gaul, he was important as well. Now, the particular story that is shown here I don't know if you know the story. It's worth knowing.
I don't know it. No,
No. Have you heard of him before?
never.
Okay. But you know about Neptune?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
obviously.
Poseidon. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he's the Celtic equivalent, right? The story is beautiful because it's the High King of Tara, which was the Druid centre of Irish affairs, where the Parliament was and where the High King lives. He was in his palace one time. I've been to Tara several times. Now it's a sort of green hill, but in those days it had a proper great hall, we'd call it. And this stranger walked in, banging on the door. It was late at night. He turned up, and he seemed well dressed, well spoken. You know, nice looking kind of character. So come in, join the feast. And the king welcomed him to sit at the top table, where his wife was and him, and they were chatting and having a feast. And the harpist was playing. It was all very civilized. And at first it was fine. This stranger behaved very well. He was, you know, he told a few stories of his own. He did drink quite a lot, mead. But then, after about a couple of hours, he started flirting with the king's wife. You know, he sort of put his chair nearer to her, stroked her knee, you know, and was eyeing her up. She was extremely beautiful, of course. And he then whispered, he said, "I'll meet you later round the back. You know, when everyone's gone to sleep, I'll be over by the tree." And the king heard this. You know, the king was shocked. Like, he broke every single rule of protocol. You don't do that if you go to a stranger, especially if he's the king, right? You just don't do that. Like, you know, I mean, so the king got up and said, "How dare you flirt with my wife? Guards!" And he was going to, like, you know, arrest him and imprison him or something. But anyway, the chap ran out the door. He fled because he knew he'd broken the rules, right? And the king was going to get him. Anyway, the king was really angry. And he organised, he said, "Come with me, come on, let's go and get him." And they chased out after him with about a 3-minute delay. And the chap ran and ran and ran. They could see him in the distance, running for the shore. They chased after him. But he got to the shore in time, and there was a boat waiting for him. So this chap got on the boat, and there was this crew. They started rowing out, and the wind and the sails took him off. But the king ordered his own naval protection squad to come round with a couple of ships. And they were only about 20 minutes after. They went after him. Anyway, for a whole day, a day and a night, they pursued this naughty character who tried to seduce his wife on the fairly rough sea. Sometimes they lost sight of the boat, sometimes they saw it again. It was on sort of near the horizon. On the second day, they arrived at a magical island where it was beautiful and calm and the sunlight and the storm had stopped. And they saw the man's boat was already parked there in the harbour. So they parked. There were 2 of them, boats, and they walked up to the main palace, seemed to be where the chief palace of the island was, and walked in. And there was that chap seated on a throne at the end of the thing, like as if he was the king of the island. And the king of Tara sort of was a bit confused, and he walked up and said, "Who are you? What are you doing here? Where am I? You know, I want to punish you." And the guy who had a long beard, he sort of laughed, and he said, "I'm Manannán mac Lir. I'm the king of the sea. I don't think you can punish me, O king." "Well, then why did you come and, like, try and seduce my wife? If you're that powerful sea god, and I do greatly respect you. Hello, Manannán. I've not met you before. Nice to meet you. Why did you come and do all that?" "That was the only way I could get you to come here. I knew you would follow me, so I had to do that. It's a bit of theatre, don't worry, my friend. Nothing, no harm intended. I wouldn't have done anything with your wife. She belongs to you. Hope you have a long and happy marriage." So anyway, so the king kind of forgave him, and they joked, and they had a little feast of their own, and dancers came in, the tables were served, poets did their poetry, and these were quite magical beings. I mean, the sea god, he gives a real good old party, and the fish was amazing, you know, fresh fish, incredible stuff going on. And they were talking about the shores of America, because these early Celts had explored America. They'd got to the Far Islands. And then it was time, you know, the end of the day and long night. So he gave him a present. He said, I want to give you a present, O king, which in the morning when you leave, take back with you. And what it was a goblet. A beautiful shaped like goblet, and this is what's shown on the card. Okay, so on the card you've got a goblet in the middle, and the king said, "Oh, that's very nice. It's a long way to come for a goblet. Like, you know, what's so special about it?" And the sea god Manannan explained that if you lie in the presence of the goblet shatters, and if you tell the truth, it comes back together again. And so it's called the cup of truth. And this is a really important motif in Druid teaching law. Manannan MacLear owns the cup of truth, and in the presence of this cup, you cannot lie. And so Manannan received it gratefully, because as a king, the most important thing to know is who's telling you the truth and who's lying among your courtiers, servants and stuff. And he was able to use that for the rest of his life, and that's why he became known as the wisest king of Ireland. Cormac MacArt, he was called, the wisest king of Ireland. Cormac, the son of Art. Now,
visit?
non, c'est mes voisins.
I heard the door.
Non, c'est l'autre côté. Oui. Okay, so fast forward to the 21st century. We're living in a world where nobody in politics tells the truth. Do we know if Robert Kennedy's telling the truth with his endorsement of Trump? Do we know if Trump is telling the truth, or is Biden, or you know, why hasn't Kamala Harris given any interviews yet? You know, etc., etc. Everybody lives in this weird, upside-down, turvy world where nothing is known for certain, and everything is opaque. So wouldn't it be amazing if we got the cup of truth back? And I'm working on a screenplay for a film whereby a couple of young students in Dublin discover the cup of truth in a building site, archaeological dig, and there it is, it's back. And then it's taken to the Irish Parliament, it's taken to the British Parliament. And basically we can sort out the politics and the problems of the world with the cup of truth. So I think this card, that to me is what this symbolises, that we need truth to bring peace back on the planet. Somebody needs to find this Cormac MacArt's cup of truth, because it must be somewhere, you know. I mean, I have one here, but you know, we need to find the original. This is where archaeology comes in, or maybe make it. You know, maybe if there's any people out there can make a magical cup that breaks, shatters when people lie. You know, that'd be great.
There are devices in the US to check
if you're lying or not.
Yes.
So maybe you can work them into a cup. You hold the cup or something. Yes, there are such devices. Yes. But the trouble is, what if the system that's employing them is itself dodgy?
Of course.
You know, like, and using it to control people rather than to actually find the truth.